where those who perceive truth may strive to make others see.
A big, powerful America, and shoot them for what?
On that continent, we are trying to forge a new identity for which we need each other.
I want you to imagine that you're a journalist and you've noticed, and the town has noticed, that journalists have been dying at an accelerated pace. And the government is corrupt. You guys have long suspected that. I think that everyone suspects it at this point. But you go to sit down with the governor, and they've been blaming journalists for, essentially, they've been blaming the victim of these crimes, which are journalists, of course. And the idea is that the journalists are at fault because they're corrupt and they're in dealings that would get them killed. Now, at this sit down, this governor says, "Here's my message for all of you. Some of the workers and collaboration in the media are involved with criminal groups. What am I asking? That please, for yourselves, for your family, but also me and my family, behave yourselves. All of us know who has taken the wrong path. We all know who has ties and who is involved with the mafia. Behave yourselves, please. Some difficult times are coming. We're going to shake the tree and a lot of rotten apples are going to fall. I honestly expect, and say this from my heart, that no worker in the media will see themselves affected by this situation." Today we'll be covering, we'll be talking about really Mexico, and in terms of journalism in Mexico and the state of journalism in Mexico through this book, In the Mouth of the Wolf, A Murder, a Cover-Up, and the True Cost of Silencing the Press. This is by Catherine Corcoran. I'm sure I'm slaughtering that. I'm pretty sure the title of this will be really The Degradation of the Truth. And when it comes down to journalists, really, they're kind of the spirit. They're the spearhead for a lot of things, including the idea of this idea of a foundry, really being centered around upholding or publicizing information that is that's originating from locals. So just a place where locals talk to locals. But really, when it comes down to the truth, the degradation of the truth, I think we all or a lot of people have in the back of their mind that things in Mexico are messed up, and in terms of the understanding of the cartels and what they can do, what they're able to do in Mexico. But this book has really been enlightening, and just going through my notes right now. This person is researching the death of a journalist, a well-known journalist, Regina Martez, and this person is it seems that this book really sheds light, and I think it's important that we know what happens when when we see corruption and real corruption to the point of where journalists can be targeted and killed at such high rates, and even threatened by government officials, as you've seen before. And I think my first note is really where this Regina Martinez, in the story revolves around Martinez. She started really humbly, from real humble beginnings, but she was definitely like a journalist from the start. She got some some potholes covered up, some stop signs put up, but she was destined for this, and this job wasn't something that she didn't necessarily start by covering criminal organizations and government crime. It was just that she really wanted to publish things and have an impact, have a real impact. My next note is this next chapter is really about international, or really there's a note here about international journalism, and this idea of journalism. There's an organization called Journalists Across Borders. I forget, Journalists Across Borders, and they really want to protect journalists, and it's important to know that there's an international organization for journalists, and the idea of protecting a lot of journalists. Of course, international being that it's important when if there is a government like that rises, such as the one in Mexico, with the power of having international journalism and journalists on your side in cases like this. At some point, you realize there's really this kind of undercurrent that controls what journalists, or what the journalists who have their journalists have an invisible filter, and this invisible filter was palpable in Mexico. And the idea is everyone knows that there's gang violence, don't talk about it. And the idea of cartels being able to do so much, it's really comes across in terms of not being able to publish certain stories. A lot of journalists, or a lot of journalists and publications, they would be in the middle of a city or a place, and they'd get threats, real threats from the cartel, and these, they have some backing to them. They have enough backing to them when it comes down to a lot of different situations, and that's when you're dealing with the degradation of a corruption, or the degradation of government in general, in terms of governing the people and what they do. It's very interesting to see. Journalists had a real impact, or had a real impact enough to where cartel members would actively, or cartels would actively threaten publications, and government officials were able to get news. They would be able to pull publications from stand, so the people couldn't see them. or they would actively get publications pulled from stands. I assume they had like a lot of they knew how to do certain, how to get that removed or get a certain publication removed, and eventually it really becomes a network. Another note was like these journal $1,000 a month was enough to survive for a journalist, and it's a good salary for journalists. And the idea is why that's important is because when it comes to, if they're ever incentivized by money, it's very easy to control people through that means. In some cases, particularly the Zetas, they used to be military. They used to, they were run by ex-military, and the cartel and the military were already kind of, they had a revolving door. But of course, that goes to, that's kind of a precursor, or really more of a it could be a precursor, but it could be a or it could just be a direct effect of really governments being corrupted themselves and having a revolving door with these organizations. And like Regina, she was known to like have like open relationships with a lot of particularly informant, or with an informant particularly. Her Clovis Dresser was like this person who, she didn't care if it was likely that she was kind of spying on her for the cartels. And it's kind of, it was something to where like, hey, this person, I like this person, I don't care about the extras. And it was very, very much it's pretty powerful stuff. Later on we'll talk more about like just her in terms of relationships, but the governor was like at some point like criticized like face to face with like, or by some journalists, in the shock. There's a particular note of the shock of being addressed in such a manner, and in such a manner of like when someone tells you kind of how, or once when you're not used to hearing how it is, and all of a sudden someone's telling you, and kind of that being an indicator of just how far gone a lot of people were to be above, real criticism and what the people really thought. I thought that was pretty noted. Or no, it was at some press conference or something, to where the governor was walking away. My next note in here is revolving around a team of outcasts that Regina was known for really surrounding herself with, and how important that was to really have a legitimate team that you trusted. And like these guys were like, they one particularly one cameraman had really long hair or something like that. They had all kinds of nicknames, like basically like Regina's outcast was one. They called her children and things like that. It was really it's really something. It's really cool. And you realize slowly but surely how she was loved or how she really came across in the community. Torture in this society is more about like really getting a person to remember and recite the official narrative of a lot of stories. And this is like this is this is them still like having to do the dance in some way, shape, or form. The fact that they have to make sure that the judges, or there's an official hearing in terms of this idea of the official narrative being important to stick to. But that's what torture is to a lot of people. What's the official, or to a lot of people in this society, was what's the official narrative and how well can you remember it? And that being like such a tremendous thing for a lot of these guys. Next note, the idea of like white supremacy being alive here, and the concept is lighter Mexicans had like or they got a lot of flack from anybody else, and I don't know, it's important that we don't really become what we're like going against. And I think that's something that a lot of people need, this idea. But in like Regina first started working, in this idea of the reason her boss wanted only like light reporters, and it became kind of a badge of honor for Regina to get rejected by this guy who only chose pretty women to do a certain job, or to be a reporter, and it became a badge of honor for her in some regard. And you see that it's alive, and alive in a lot of different ideas and countries. And now this there's a quote here about like you can report on, like, if you can report on politics and crime, and of course it's up to you in terms of like how you go about that, but the fusion of politics and crime is really going to result in trouble you can expect that much more trouble. It's really powerful in terms of the idea of when politicians are blatantly criminals and what they can do. At some point they did like they did a survey of who went missing, and a lot of these guys, or like there were more people who went missing as a result. And their family members and friends remember seeing them last being seen with like getting in patrol cars, or a police officer telling them to get in, and that is it's very telling in terms of the idea of fusion of politics and crime. And what that looks like and what that can look like. You think these are supposed to be the protectors of society, and you get scared when they ask you to come down to the station. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's crazy. And this revolving door is like, it's powerful when you don't really have to like disclose information about a lot of different things as well. It becomes more prevalent, when it comes down to like disclose or information disclosure, public information, stuff like that. incredibly powerful method of control. And like I said, this invisible, like, this idea of you know, journalists who, you know, who fall in line following this guideline becomes much more real for them, and it's insane. At some point, Regina becomes active in, you know, political fights, and this, you know, her partnerships were so important to her in terms of, like, really understanding, like, you know, the idea of the power in partnerships. Very much noted. Of course, she had her band of outcasts, but also she had, like, peers that were just, like, powerful in terms of, like, trying to go up against the system in one way or another. My note here says official criminals are the most dangerous. And like I said before, when there's a revolving door between politics and crime, it's tremendous, and you won't necessarily. The idea is you won't necessarily know it when you see it. You won't know that it exists when it does exist, and that's what's so powerful about it, is because you don't even, like, sometimes, or they know about it here, which is, you know, part of why they got the, you know, the international journalists involved, or the international the journalists across borders involved. But really, it's very, very much, when you're able to control the narrative, it becomes so much more in terms of the impact. They were able to, and, like, at some point, the journalists, that they were successful in shifting like parties from one party to another. And it's important because here we think the choice is an illusion, and to some extent it very well is, but in terms of the power, there's still power there that we can choose. They still have to do this dance. And in this case, maybe, less journalists died under this particular person or political party. And my next note is, after Regina's death, like there was a spike in dead journalists everywhere, and that's kind of what led up to the beginning intro, in terms of there was really a government official. I'm not sure if he was actually the governor, but I do know that I do remember that, or I did quote directly from the book in terms of what that governor or what that official was able to say to this room. And the collusion, the accusation that journalists were criminals, that's why they died. And that was it's hard, you can, if you like it, like if you say it enough, it can, it's true. You know what I'm saying? Like the power and essentially just speaking this into a microphone in your fancy suit, regardless of the fact of you being a criminal, it can somehow somebody somewhere can call that the truth. It's crazy to me. And at some point they made a lot of journalists quit. Like, they didn't feel safe. and it was it got to to the point to where a lot of people, like, when you realize, like, the realization of being tapped or having your phone tapped and simply just saying, okay, I quit this story over the line that you think is tapped, became kind of a thing of, if anywhere, like, I just need to make sure that these guys know that I quit. And the best way to do that is by using a phone that I believe is tapped, to make sure that they know that I'm quitting this story. And it's it becomes or it became to the point to where, hey, look, basically speaking into your phone was speaking to some criminal organization or some cartel leader about some shit. It's crazy, but that was reality for a lot of these guys. Like I said, people love Regina. Like, local restaurants, like, they didn't sell beer, but they went across, or like the waiter would go, like, to the across the street and buy a beer for Regina, because Regina liked a beer with her meal and shit. Like, it's cool to see that. And like, the gatekeeper in our hometown knew, like, he didn't have to look up her name. At some point, somebody somebody wants to look up her grave, and he knows where it's at. And that's, like, so incredibly powerful in terms of the impact that she had with that community is very much something. And the next note is really just about how, like, both sides of the political party were essentially criminals, and it's all about choosing, like, it was all about choosing the lesser of two evils. But still, the fact that makes a difference, still the lesser of two evils. But also, it's important that people do realize when there is people, of course, realize the difference, but also realize that they are evil, and and understanding why. Like, neither party votes down the budget for military or the defense, or the supposed defense. You know what I'm saying? Like, nobody goes against that. And it's important to know when someone stands against it, or and like I said, being more precise in this idea. The governor, like, that was a threat. And the idea is it's powerful to be in such a nice office and receive such a direct threat. You know what I'm saying? Like, it is, it's powerful in so many different ways. This is supposedly, like, I mean, just imagining, like, this guy at this round table essentially telling journalists, don't speak, or your family may suffer, and it's crazy. Official lingo, our families, but you really mean you'll kill us if we say this. And we, and all the journalists were in, like, an uproar after that. But, like, the message was very much it was very much perceived as a threat. And if I was a journalist there, I would definitely take it as a direct threat. Like, don't say anything to any. It's incredible to think, but yeah. The revolving door got very powerful. Another note was, you can put your phone apparently in the freezer for privacy sake, and the idea here was like Edward Snowden. This is something from Edward Snowden, and the at some point, like I said, tap phones were really a thing, and it's really in terms of a lot of the providers, of course, SIM cards, they go through corporations, private corporations, and if there's a revolving door between criminals and the government, you can bet that there's a revolving door between criminals in these in a lot of private companies and organizations. Now, these guys were able to tap a significant amount of phones for privacy's sake, and I'm not sure of the climate for cellular services in Mexico, but there's only a few here in America in terms of what is broadcast and what we know about. I could only imagine, like somebody having access to Verizon or Sprint, like just being able, like what they would have access to when they have access to it, and then coming across and being directly related to criminals, that power, like, it's not, oh, this isn't for an official record, this is so we can kill you the next time you show up, or we can facilitate your death and facilitate a narrative around how you died. It's crazy, and it's so it's crazy, but it's really powerful. And they were pretty direct in paying off journalists sometimes, and I guess like the idea of I guess when killing someone became so expensive, we can pay this person off, maybe and that'd be less expensive. Statements. This idea of official statements, and at some point, you're talking to, you're investigating a story, but you come against like somebody who has remembered the official narrative, and that was a defense for them in whatever regard. When they realized the journalists are poking up a certain tree, they were like it like I can see someone reciting this official narrative, and that being able to shut the journalist up about whatever. It's crazy, but very much a reality that a lot of people, I believe, nowadays can see more often. And the idea of at some point, you're following, or the journalists are following somebody, and at some point they realize that the people standing on the corner serving ice cream are probably drug dealers, but also watchmen as well for a lot of people. So that became kind of a something of note. At some point, fake companies and nonprofits were used in government contracts, like, at some point, I think the universities turned them into contracts, or the official the university that's put, like, the big guy, the big university treats this like, oh, this is the store, or basically this is the contract for XYZ government, and they, like, essentially, like, all these government contracts were going to the same people, and these people were fake companies, and basically they were able to successfully funnel money from government to whatever entities that they wanted to through this, this idea of government contracts. Very much something of note. Of course, being able to do this is ridiculous, but it's a real thing in a lot of places in terms of government contracts being kind of a place where the government can find or can get money to where they want money. Like I said, they were outright, like, these guys sometimes, like, outright paid off journalists. In some particular instances, pretty crazy. Now they at some point, this idea of mass graves, it became a focus, because these mass graves became official graveyards at some point, and it's unreal to think, but trying to locate your loved one, you could run into 5 bodies, or trying to you run into 5 bodies trying to basically find your loved one that's gone missing. And there could be another name on that particular tombstone that's not even your loved one, and it's like, but they particularly they feel it, or they noted this body here, and they found like mass graves. It was crazy. But also the idea of how long to keep a body, and in terms of how long to keep a body in storage, was really like a lot went into that, in terms of they had to keep the body for a year, and at some point the mayor has to like basically go down and essentially like really pay attention to the idea of what was happening in a lot of these graveyards that were in their jurisdiction, and having to pay attention to journalists like asking questions. At some point, I believe it was slipped my mind, but I think it was the idea of in jurisdiction. There was some point where there was literally a body like found like in directly across or affiliated with like some kind of police training facility, and the idea is that the government or the governor or the government somebody had to pay for that particular mistake. But that just proves how rampant and crazy people were, like the idea of like criminals in government and that revolving door got for these guys. And the idea of and the power of international news picking that up was crazy. But at some point, I think somewhere in Europe there was like an international news agency picked up the story and ran it in 20 different languages about Regina, and they got the who is it, Kathy or Catherine doesn't necessarily believe the story, but they got they ran the story anyway in terms of why she died, covering, I think she died, or they said she died covering the mass graves, and she didn't believe that, but she did believe that at some point covering politicians and the collusion between politics and crime, that's what ultimately got her killed. Means and where a lot of these interviews took place was also a powerful note in terms of a lot of these guys were able to, or were recording conversations, you know, and they were familiar with a lot of the places where they decided to meet these journalists. Bars, things like that. Someone's a regular there, you know, now all of a sudden, you know, like they can it's very common for them to record and be able to secretly record a meeting without the other person noticing. Very interesting. Well, now the idea of the relationships with the locals, of course, was something of note, something that was noted all through Regina's life and Regina's story. But when it came down to the this particular story in general, I think what's really, really of note is what happens when, you know, a journalist decides to cover the truth, or the truth being the collusion of government and crime, and how dangerous that was and that got in this particular climate, and to where it's very likely that Regina was killed based on the collusion of or the fusion between government and criminal organization. That is the story for today, I suppose. And if I'll see you in, I'm your bookman, Sleepy, and I'll see you hopefully soon. Thank you. Goodbye.